All right, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Let me know where you are from, and uh, let's see, we've already got comments here. All right, very good. Well, let me know where you're from and what line of work that you're in. Let me know your, let's see, where you're from and what line of work you're in. All right, very good. It is good to see you all. um, so thank you, Denise. Let's see. I'm interested to know about generational changes that has occurred from the 1990s until today. Wow. Um, I don't have an answer for that. From the 1990s until today, I don't know. I'm gonna give you my perception of strategic leadership, though, and that is a question I can definitely answer. So, very good, Denise. I'm not sure if you're signed up for the right thing, but you're welcome to stay if you'd like. All right. Is it Karen? Hello, everyone joining in from Florida. Very good. Let me know what line of work that you're in and what it is that you're hoping to learn from strategic leadership because there's so much importance around leadership. It's not the only thing that is in the business, right? There's lots of different things. For those of you who've ever been a part of my other trainings where I talk about the strategic business growth multiplier, we talk a lot about systems. And systems are really important, but systems are not enough. That's where systems leave off, is where good and sound leadership really steps in. I have an absolutely amazing group of people that work for me, and they understand the systems really well, but I also think they work so well because I feel like I'm a good leader. I'm not the best, but I'm definitely a better leader than I am a manager. But I also bring in other leaders. And because I'm bringing in other people who also have leadership qualities, which we're going to talk about today, which is around trust, which is around vision, which is around communication, and because they're strong in those three elements, that means that they bring in leadership qualities as well. And that really has a scaling impact, a scaling effect on a business. So we're going to be talking about that here in just a little bit. So really good. I'm glad you could join me today. We've got a lot of people joining already. Let's see. And I apologize if I'm getting these names wrong. I'm going to do my very best. Sruti from Liverpool, UK, pursuing your MBA. What's your MBA in? I'd love to know that. I'm in school as well right now. I'm pursuing my PhD in organizational psychology. So I appreciate the grind. I hope it's working out well for you. Aludare is hello everyone joining from England in the daycare industry. Excellent, very good. Glad to have you here, Aludare. Let's see. Aditya, hello everyone joining from Sheffield. Operations, credit risk, technology, implementation, scaling, and startups. All right, excellent. Sounds like you're a busy person. Excellent. Carrie is from New Hampshire, manufacturing, home building industry. Very good. Is it the manufactured homes? Is that what you're talking about? I'm just trying to get some understanding there, Carrie. Let's see. We have Vladimir, who is a poor student from Ukraine. Oh, well, you have got a lot going on in your country right now, and certainly our prayers go out to you guys. Hope you're doing well. Let's see. We've got Denise again. Oh, hello again. All right, retired seasoned consultant and coaching young entrepreneurs is challenging. I'm in DC. Oh, very good, very good. Yeah, and in coaching young entrepreneurs, I'll tell you though, I work with entrepreneurs of all different uh all different aspects from age and um gender and marital status and the whole things, and I will tell you it is truly, you run the gamut. So I truly appreciate what you're trying to accomplish there, Denise. Good for you. Darius Brown, thanks for having us. Absolutely, it's good to have you here, Darius. um we got AJX.67 from India, from Anshu, is joining us from YouTube. Very good. And also an MBA student. Missed that. Yes, very good. All good. Let's see. And we've got just a couple other people, and we're going to get started here. So, panelized homes. Oh, okay, very good. Understood. Let's see. Darius, we're just gonna do a few more of these because I want to get started here. I'm a brand partner, and this is going to be helpful, by the way, in case you're wondering why I'm going through these because I want to make these sessions relevant to the people who are attending. So if I have a bit of an understanding in terms of the demographic and psychographic and geographic area of who I'm speaking to, it's much easier for me to direct this training towards you guys. So thank you for just giving me a few minutes grace to go through these. I'm a product partner helping business with custom branded products here in Illinois. Go Bears. the Bears needed some help, but then again, so did the Colts. I'm just north of Indianapolis, so I'm in Lafayette. So I'm your neighbor to the east. Very very good, Darius. Yeah, they all needed some help this year, right? Let's see. Shruti is executive MBA specializing in financial consulting and strategy. I am from automotive background with 8 years go-to-market experience in India. Wow. Okay, very good. Man, we got some really sharp people here today. Great. I'm very new to business. I'm a qualified social worker, so looking to develop as many business coaching skills as possible. Emily, listen, if you have been in social work, you probably have more skills than you may realize, because it is a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of skills that you will develop. But again, all of this stuff can be learned though, right? So learning that people skill stuff and what you're learning here in the strategic leadership side, that's what we're going to be talking about today, strategic leadership. But I just want to encourage you that, yes, all of that other stuff, the system stuff, that is other stuff that I teach as well. I'm going to be hosting classes all next week as well. But go on to Eventbrite and get registered so you can see everything out there that's important to you as a business owner. We have Needhe. I am a marketing and brand specialist from Edinburgh. Very good. I was in Edinburgh. So my family's from Scotland. So I said Edinburgh just because that's what us Americans do, but it's actually Edinburgh. So I was there when I was like 9. Beautiful city. Jill is a photographer, headshots, and personal branding in Ireland. Excellent. Very good. Glad that you could join us, Jill. And Karan is a performance strategist, helping leaders boost focus and productivity, helping fintech teams reduce costs. Excellent. We have got, man, let's give yourselves a little mini round of applause. This is a solid group. So very, very good. I'm glad that you guys could join today. All right. So what we're talking about, let's get right into this because we have a lot to cover. And this is about strategic leadership, and strategic leadership specifically for business owners. So if you're not a business owner, that's fine. If you are just wanting to learn about strategic leadership, that's fine. I am going to make it relevant more to the business owner though, but because there are people on here who are students, I think that's amazing. There are people who are on here who are joining that are just wanting to learn and expand their skill set. I think that's fantastic. If you're not a business owner, that's fine. You don't have to hop off. You're welcome to stick around. And I'm just letting you know I am going to be directing this conversation more towards the business owner because that's the avatar that I know. And that's the avatar that I seek to help the most. But again, a lot of people stick around, and even if they're not in a business that they own, they may have a division that they have ownership in, right? Or a unit that they have ownership in, or even ownership over themselves. So I think that's fantastic. All right, so let's get to it. Just one quick point, just one quick data point here. This is going to go for about an hour or so. This is one of my shorter ones. But the one thing I want you to understand around strategic leadership is this is not a one and done exercise. When you're learning about leadership, this is stuff that you have to take and you have to go and try to implement. So if you're not going to take the time to actually infuse this into your DNA, the next 45 minutes to an hour are probably going to be a massive waste of your time. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to put away all your other stuff. I know some of you, many of you are, it's around bedtime-ish, right? Jill and we've got a few other people from the UK. I know it's around, bedtime. Maybe you're putting kids to bed. Maybe you're putting yourself to bed. Do your best not to multitask. Do your very best. I know some of you may have other things that are going on, but do your best not to multitask because what we're trying to do is train our brains. This is your CEO hour, and I want you to train your brain not to multitask or wander and go into a TikTok video, and you might lose or might miss a really important critical component that's going to be important to you. So again, this doesn't change my life. I do these for free, but it absolutely could change yours. So I just want to make sure that you are taking the good opportunity with your time. All right, so this is a strategic approach to leadership. And I know sometimes as a strategist, Sometimes I'm referred to as a fractional CSO, which is a chief strategic officer. And this is when I come into an organization and work with executives with their strategic planning. And sometimes I'm out in the field helping managers and supervisors be more effective as managers and as leaders and as shift supervisors. But sometimes I'm also a trainer, right? And when I get brought in as a change agent, in that thing around change, being a change agent, that is where I'm always trying to help establish priorities. And we're going to come back to establishing priorities here in just a little bit. But I just want you to understand, when you're talking a strategic approach to leadership, that is a top-down approach. But specifically looking at you. So we're not going to get into like the little tactical things like, well, when they say this, then you say that. Like, we're not going to get into a lot of that. There will be some of that probably, but I just want to make sure that you understand that. The other thing is too, as we get into this, if you have questions, ask specific questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat. I have natural breakpoints in here. Just go ahead and type them in the comment section, and I will do my very best to answer those as we go. So when we're talking about strategic leadership, there are three main components to strategic leadership, and that is around trust, that's around vision, and that's around communication. And when you're looking at at all three of these things have to be incredibly true. You can't be an effective strategic leader if you don't have all three of these areas. I want to tell you a quick story about a guy. His name's Darwin Smith. And Darwin Smith, for those of you who are in the Midwest, he actually grew up not very far from where I live in Lafayette, Indiana. He lives in a little town, or he grew up rather in a little town just north of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And he loved to spend time on a backhoe, of all things, right? And this is a guy grew up very meager beginnings, and he worked his tail off, and he was a smart dude. Like, he understood that he early on recognized the need for information, the need for knowledge, the need to go to school, and the need to better himself. Now, he chose to go the university route. I don't think that is the route for everyone. And trust and know, I got my bachelor's degree in accounting, and I had a 25-year hiatus before I decided to go back to school to get my PhD in organizational psychology. However, I spent a lot of time in between there educating myself with lots of different books, lots of different seminars, lots of different webinars, all the different things, okay? Well, he really understood the value of really learning and spent a lot of time doing that. And he worked for a company called Kimberly-Clark. Now, Kimberly-Clark may not be a name that you necessarily know, but I can guarantee you pretty much across the world that it has touched your life in some way. And the reason for that is because he really understood what it was like to make really difficult decisions as a CEO. Darius Brown, yeah, it's right. That's a huge company, right? And the interesting thing about that, Darius, is the interesting thing about Kimberly-Clark is back in the 70s, he was brought in as the CEO. Okay, I believe it was 1971. I might have my dates off just a little bit, but I'm not a historian. I'm a strategist. I'm not a historian. But I believed he was hired in 1971. And he recognized, now up to that point, Kimberly-Clark was a paper company. They were in commodity paper. They were basically selling just boxes and boxes and reams of paper. That's what they were known for. And they had been known for that for the better part of 100 years. So they had multiple paper mills. They had about 3,000 acres worth of timberland that they owned because they wanted to control the upline, right? So they had all this valuable land, but the problem was their stock price was down about 38% by the time he took the helm. And the reason for that is because paper was becoming such a commodity, meaning there was no pricing power anymore because there were so many people who were getting into the game, and that was really compressing margins. I give this guy a ton of credit because Darwin Smith recognized that there was no future in commodity paper. So he was thinking, okay, what do we have to do? What he knew right away what they had to do. He had been a CEO for 2 months, and his top order of the day was to sell the mills, sell the paper mills. Now, let me just describe to you what that would be like. That would be like General Motors no longer producing cars. That's what I'm talking about. That would be like Boeing no longer fabricating airplanes. That's the kind of shift we're talking about here. So when not only was he willing to shut down and sell the mills, he was also willing to sell that 3,000 acres of very valuable timberland so he could build a war chest. Now, where he did see the market shifting was towards consumer products. Consumer products. Now the thing was, even though he saw this, he wasn't able to do this just by decree. Yes, he was the CEO, but he still had shareholders to answer to. He had a board of directors to answer to. Not to mention he had all these people that he employed, thousands of people that would have revolted if he just basically said, nope, we're going to sell the mills. Do what I say. Even though he was ultimately right, he had to demonstrate really good leadership. And he did that by demonstrating and creating high degrees of trust. And he also had to bring people into a shared vision, not like, hey, here's my vision, just take it because I'm the boss, but a shared vision, meaning you have to enroll people into that vision. We're going to come back to that here in a second, but also into being an effective communicator. So we're going to talk about all these different things, but right now you have to understand that being an effective strategic leader involves all three of these things. Now, I have, in my studies in leadership and even in my studies as an industrial and organizational practitioner in my PhD studies, I have looked at so many different leadership styles, and not one of them is really called strategic leadership. But this is so important because all three of these elements, these three pillars here, are there other aspects of leadership that are important? Yes. In the Marine Corps, we were taught the leadership traits: justice, judgment, decisiveness, integrity, enthusiasm, dependability, tact, initiative, endurance, right? Bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, enthusiasm, right? Like all of those things, all of those individual traits are so important, but I'm telling you, they won't matter squat if you're missing these three. Because think about it. If you have, let's say that people, they see your vision, they believe in the vision, and you're a really effective communicator, but if they don't trust you, are they going to follow you? No, you know that. You know they're not going to follow you. Let's say that they trust you. Let's say that you're, again, an amazing communicator. You can really, you're just a great orator and you're just great at communicating. But if you don't have a shared vision, they're going to wonder why they're there. Where are we going? What's the point? And if you, let's say that you have their trust, let's say that you brought them in and enrolled them into the shared vision, but you're a horrible communicator, meaning that you either scream all the time, or you basically type in caps all the time, right? Or you just don't communicate often enough, you're not going to be an effective leader, and you probably won't even know why. Okay, so all three of these elements are absolutely critical. So let's see here. We got a couple of Francesca. Hello, love your name. Looking for better knowledge on sustainability business. Okay, we're going to be talking about that. Obviously, this is around strategic leadership. Mohammed is an entrepreneur. Hello. Denise got frozen, but I'm back. Yes, good to have you back. And essential needs brand. Oh, if you're talking about Kimberly Clark, yeah, they have all sorts of stuff. And here's the interesting thing. So I'm going to get back to this shift that they had, especially where Darwin Smith was really bringing other people into his realm. Okay, but this is where you're looking at strategic leadership as three pillars. You want to think of it like three legs of a stool, and that's really, really important. So the nice thing about strategic leadership is that this can be applied at all levels of the organization, but you have to have all three of these things equal, just like legs of a stool, right? But they can apply not just the top level, but at the division level and the department level, and even all the way down to the unit level, all the way down. You can be a strategic leader, and it has a ripple effect on everybody around you. Because trust begets trust, vision begets vision, effective communication begets effective communication. That's why this is so powerful. So let's start with trust. Now, one of the interesting things, and I'm going to show you a picture here. I mentioned that I was in the Marine Corps for a little while. This is actually a picture of me standing outside the airport terminal in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. We were dropping some people off in Cambodia, and this is where it was so interesting. What I was part of a flight crew, and I was a navigator on the C-130. And here's a photograph that I took when we were actually flying over the northern part of Thailand. This was a different flight, but what we were doing was we were doing low level flights. And the nice thing about, I mean, it was kind of fun, honestly. But we were flying this, 150 foot. Basically, it's about 150 feet by 150 feet. So it's 150 feet long, 150 feet wide. For my international folks, if you want to convert that to meters for me, I don't know how to do that on the fly, but basically it's a big airplane. Okay, it's got 4 turboprops. It's a big airplane, and we are flying. And this is what's called a section. So when you have 2 airplanes, it's called a section. When you have 3 or more, it's called a division. So we're in a section, and we were the lead aircraft for a while. And keep in mind, what we would do as the lead aircraft is we would fly somewhere between 300 to 500 feet above the ground. And we're going about 250 to 300 knots. Okay, so actually closer to 250 knots, which is about 300 miles an hour. It's fast. We are cooking across the ground. So I want you to understand that when you're in that role where you don't really have a lot of margin for error, and you're going over and around and through canyons and things like that, it is an absolutely it is a thrilling experience for sure, but everyone on that crew has to trust one another. And a lot of times, the pilots, they're just plugged into making sure that they're not going to fly into anything obvious, but they're also making sure that they're paying attention to their instruments. Because if I tell them a heading, hey, head 252, right? It doesn't mean 254. It doesn't mean 250. They have to fly 252, right? That's really important. Because if they're at 254, there might be a tower off to the right that we might hit. Okay, so this is why it's so important to have the trust of everybody on the crew. It was interesting that, so this photo, actually, we weren't the lead aircraft anymore, just to talk about this photo real fast. This photo, let me go ahead and take myself down. So you can see I don't know, let me get down on the bottom here. So you can see, like, we're up and above the aircraft, so they're probably around 400, 500 feet above the ground, and we were obviously elevated. And I took a photo with my 35 millimeter camera back in the day. That was like super slick. But so we weren't unsafe or anything. I was just I wasn't, we were following the lead aircraft at that point. So we took a quick shot of them, but it was really fun because we recognized what really a good team looks like. I remember walking into a base operations one time, and part of my job as the navigator was to file flight plans. So I would go into this one particular base operations, and I was to get the weather brief, and then I was also to file the flight plan. So I'm waiting. I can't file the flight plan until I get the weather, because I wanted to make sure I knew what the weather was taking off, what the weather was en route, and then of course what the weather was when we were landing. And so I'm just waiting. And I remember this sign, and I'm going to go ahead and show you this. It was just this particular sign which says, "When I'm right, no one remembers, and when I'm wrong, no one forgets." And how true is that for a weather guy? But how true is that for us as leaders? And how often, when we're leaders and we're sticking our necks out there, that when we're right, no one remembers, and when we're not wrong, no one forgets. And that was the interesting thing about this. And you have to think about how important this is to trust, to creating trust with the people around you. Because again, you might be putting yourself out there and you're having to create trust with people. Well, how do you create trust? Well, this is where you start to get into different levels of trust and understanding there are just different types of trust. There's predictive trust, right? Like, yeah, I know so-and-so is going to show up at their job, right? They're going to do their thing. They're not a knock the cover off the ball sort of. Sorry, that's a baseball reference. They're not a exemplary employee, but they'll do their job. They leave and they go home, and I know they're going to come back the same day, right? That's predictive trust. That's a much lower standard of trust. right? It's very situational. But think about vulnerability-based trust. Vulnerability-based trust, think about this in the context of maybe a family dynamic. Now, I know this is very true among some families here in the United States. It might be true for some families there, where you live. But do you ever have those family dynamics where you're like, oh, anything I say can and will be used against me on social media or when at the next family function? You know what I'm talking about? So because you don't trust the family dynamic, someone asks you how you're doing, you go, hey, how's it going? Oh, good, good. Right? You're not going to say much, right? How's things at work? Oh, it's great, great. Right? You don't really expound on much because you're afraid of being vulnerable, because you're afraid of it being used against you. There's no vulnerability-based trust. So you have to think about this. And again, that when you have predictive trust, you might have someone that you might trust to pick up your mail, but you probably don't have the same level of trust for that person to pick up your kids after school. Make sense? So you have to understand how predictive trust is very situational. Vulnerability-based trust is much deeper standard. So you have to understand that in a low trust environment, everything is slower. Everything is slowed down and everything is suspect. You just like, well, why did you say the instead of some other word? Right? Everything is just constantly, and this is especially what's going on right now in the political environment in the United States. I just don't even want to go on social media anymore. I just want to look at cat videos. Like, just send me cat videos. The other day I posted on social media, send me your best dad jokes. And they were the corniest, cheesiest jokes, but I literally laughed for the first time on social media in probably weeks. Because it's just like, it's so much distrust going on. And that's what you have to recognize, is that trust and distrust can actually coexist, right? You might trust someone around a certain thing. Trust is not a continuum when you're looking at trust and distrust. They can actually exist in the same element. And that sucks, because you might trust someone around certain elements, but you may not trust them around something else. Okay. So, Darius is saying trust and communication right there. Yep, absolutely. Oh, and you're talking about yeah, I saw you posted that with the flight crews. Yeah, especially flying at 300 miles an hour. No, serious about social media. Oh my gosh, it's exhausting, right? And the thing is, here's the interesting thing: is there's so many of us in the middle that just go like, oh my gosh, when are mom and dad gonna stop fighting? It's just exhausting. No one cares. Like, there's just so much of that just people just don't care about. So anyway, I just want you to understand in the context of change management. Now, whenever I hear of change management or any of these like terms that I feel like came out of a university from someone who's like never had to make payroll, I always like lean back in my chair a little bit. I'm like, okay. But really, when you're looking to change what's going on in an organization, you have to recognize that this is your role as a leader. This is what you signed up for, and you have to be able to have people's trust. So this is where you have to recognize that because growth requires change. This is what Darwin Smith. There's a Darius and Darius Brown and a Darwin Smith. This is what Darwin Smith had to recognize, that there was a lot of change that was about to happen in Kimberly-Clark, and leadership is what manages that change. So effective strategic leaders recognize that not everyone has the same relationship with change. That's interesting. And this is why you have to recognize that because not everybody has that same relationship with change, not all changes that you bring are people going to embrace, even if it makes sense to them logically. And this is important for you to know. In organizations, especially larger organizations, 70%, this has been tracked, by the way, this is not a made-up statistic, 70% of change attempts fail. And you have to recognize why. And this is it. If you get nothing else from today, and you want to hop off, by the way, I didn't mention it earlier, but for those of you who maybe have to hop off a little earlier, you will get the replay sent to you. But here's the thing. For the reason why many change attempts fail is because for many, the discomfort of suffering is far more tolerable than the discomfort of change. Let me say that again. The discomfort of suffering is much more tolerable than the discomfort of change, because it's the devil that they know. Darwin Smith of Kimberly-Clark recognized that he was in a dying industry. The paper mills, which had driven the company to where it was over the last 100 years, were the foundation of his company. But the problem was they were becoming a millstone around their necks. It was the very thing that was holding them back. Smith knew that he had to change the direction of his company, but he had to gain their trust first. Okay? So that's where you have to recognize that this environment, and the way that he did that is he went out and he talked to the individual board members. He talked to people at the street level, people that were doing the jobs, people that were, hey, tell me what you think about this. Tell me give me your opinion. And he knew enough to stop talking. He listened. He didn't engage in a lot of banter. He didn't engage in a lot of back and forth. Like, he would listen. He really actively listened. And this is where, and it's in this environment of trust where change is allowed to occur. It sows the soil for those things to germinate. So effective change management is really about, first and foremost, defining why we have to change, explaining why we have to change, and then ultimately asking for input. Hey, this is what we're seeing. This is why we're really thinking this is a problem. Tell me what your thoughts are. And then you shut up and you listen. It's so important that when you're taking that time to do this, and Darwin Smith really understood that. So what happened then, so this is again about the strategic leadership where you have this trust, vision, and communication. He understood enough where he had this vision of going actually into consumer products, consumer paper, not just like the bulk paper that they had been known for the last 100+ years. But what he understood is that history was not the same as legacy. And that was really important. So what he did was he went on and he said, okay, I've got this vision and we're going to spend a lot of money in research and development. At that time, the big 800-pound gorilla in the room was Procter & Gamble. Remember that. And Kimberly-Clark was basically they were publicly traded. They were a good-sized company at that point in time. But what they were not known for was consumer products, things like tissues, things like diapers. They weren't known for that stuff. But he took the money from this war chest that he had built to go toe-to-toe with Procter & Gamble. We're talking about David against Goliath. There was no surety that they were going to win. What they did in 1978 was they launched Huggies brand of diapers. And this is important. They went through all this scientific understanding of how to wick fluids away from baby's skin, because because obviously, you can't have that touching a baby's skin. So learning how to wick that away, where it was basically creating like a one-way valve away for those fluids, right? Those bodily fluids away from the baby to obviously for healthier babies and so forth and so on. In 1978, they had launched the Huggies brand of diapers. By 1984, 6 years later, every other diaper sold was a Huggies brand diaper. Every other diaper. That means that they had 50% market share in 6 years. That is absolutely incredible. From a shift from 1971 through however long it took them to sell the mills and the land and everything else, to build this war chest, to put it into R&D, to get and to change the direction of this company into selling diapers, and which, by the way, they also shifted into Depends, which are the adult diapers, right? They shifted into that, and because of their marketing, very clever marketing, they made it so it wasn't weird, right? I mean, people kind of made fun of it, but it was funny because back in the early 80s, I remember those commercials. I was like, oh, that's weird. But the point was they had this woman who was, I don't remember the name, but she was very well known as an actress who just had a good, who was able to, again, generate trust among an older generation. And that is where things really started to change for Kimberly-Clark. And it got to a point where I believe, and I'm going by memory here, so if you want to correct me, if you want to look this up, but I believe at the time it was like $6.8 billion in their revenues. A third of their entire revenues was coming from diapers, right? They might call it a crappy business or not, but I'll tell you what, it's pretty profitable. Um, so let's see here. We've got a couple of questions. Daisha, how do you balance vulnerability with professionalism? That's really good. That's a great question. Look, you can demonstrate vulnerability, Daisha, by not necessarily getting too personal. But I also don't mind sharing things that are personal to me. Okay? I always think that there are certain things that are appropriate to share. I'm kind of an open book. I don't mind sharing certain things, but when it gets to certain things like, with my family, again, I don't have a problem sharing it. Like right now, if you like, I'm 53 years old, okay? And my bride and I, we decided that we wanted more children. We have a 20-year-old son, we have a 17-year-old son, and we have a 3-year-old daughter. And you're like, wow, Mark, you did not do the math. I'm like, no, because I am exhausted by the time I get home, and my 3-year-old is ready to go, right? She is ready to drag me around, and we play dinosaur show and all these weird things that she makes up, and it's a blast. But the point is, like, people think, oh, was that a whoops, was that a surprise? No, we were actually trying to have more children, right? Now I can share that story with you and be a little vulnerable with you, and it doesn't necessarily impact my leadership for you. If anything, it lets you know that I'm a person, that I'm humble. So I think where you're looking at this from professionalism, it's also going to really depend on the culture that you're in. And I don't necessarily mean um like national culture. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about, although certainly there is a component there that matters. But I'm also talking about the organizational culture. Because of the organizational culture, I remember I was talking with a friend who is in the how do I want to say this? The energy field here, right? So energy meaning like they power distribution and things like that. That is known like to be a very, like, you don't cross certain personal lines. And I thought, wow, that's very typical in that industry. Like, you just don't talk about your personal life. You keep all that stuff separate. But I'm telling you, like, the organizational culture will probably matter in terms of how much you share, but I'm telling you, that's probably that much more important that you do share certain things, but you can't go too far outside the lines of company culture. I'm just telling you, because you will get, if you start getting too much on the fringes, it's just easier to pluck you off, especially the lower you are. As you get higher and higher in your organization, you have more impact on the effective company culture. But that's how you balance it. In my mind, I think that you can demonstrate some vulnerability, but also recognize and demonstrate your competence, because again, the fastest way to build trust is to demonstrate competence. Don't forget that. I don't care if you're in lead generation, in marketing. I don't care if you're in sales. I don't care if you're in a leadership position. The fastest way for you to build trust with your constituents is to demonstrate competence. Demonstrate you know what you're talking about. And also, right along with that symbiotic relationship of competence is also character. You have to demonstrate good character. If you're going out and you're talking about, oh man, I went out on a bender Friday night and woke up, woke up with a flip flop on one foot and a glove on the other foot, and you don't even remember how you got there, and you're bragging about that Monday morning to your coworkers, probably not the best look for you from a character perspective. You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm talking about is, you have to recognize that there's that balance between, for both competence and character. You have to be demonstrating good character. If I was coming on here and I mentioned, oh, I have this bride, and my kids and everything else, and I'm like, oh man, I got to rush out of here because I got a date, with my girlfriend. You're like, what are you talking about? You have a date with your girlfriend? You just mentioned you had a wife, right? Like, all of a sudden, it won't matter how competent I am. You're probably like leaning back in your chair a little bit. That's what I'm saying. Character and competence, they are two trees that share the same root system. And they're those two things, I'm telling you, you have to have both. You have to have, it both starts, ends, and lives in character. But to build trust, you have to demonstrate your competence. So hopefully that is helpful for you. Really, really good question. Thank you, Daisha. Denise, yep. You got it. We'll be sending the recordings. You'll be getting that again. If you signed up for this on Eventbrite, you will be getting those delivered to you. Karen, LOL. I know I'm hilarious. I have no idea what you're laughing at, but I'll go with it. Let's see. Darius, I can do much better with the vulnerability part. I can be quite strong-willed and stubborn in some ways. Yeah, Darius, and I'll tell you, it's hard, right? It's difficult, especially when I will tell you this. When I was in my early 20s, there was a young man who reached out to me recently. He was 25, and he reached out because he was looking for help with these businesses that he's got, and he knew he needed some help from someone on the outside. And I give this young man so much credit because he asked good questions, and then he listened. He really listened. And he listened from a guy that he didn't know was literally more than twice his age. I know I look younger, but he literally asked me, like, he was asking such good questions, and then he was listening. I was like, how old are you? And he told me he was 25. I was like, oh my gosh, dude, like, you are so far ahead of where I was at 25, because not only would I not humble myself to ask the questions that you're asking, I would spend so much time trying to prove to you that I belonged in the conversation by interjecting and waiting for you to stop talking so I could impress you. And I'm telling you, man, like, that was one thing that really, really held me back. And just me being vulnerable with you right now, again, in lead generation, they call that a damaging admission. You have to be a little careful with this. You have to balance it a little bit, because you don't want especially if you're operating in a low trust environment. Daisha, you mentioned that, how do you balance that? You have to recognize that when you're operating with a low trust environment, you don't want things to be used against you. Okay. So, really, 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 really important. So let's put the fries in the bag on that. We talked about trust. We talked about vision. Now let's talk about communication. Communication is so incredibly important because, again, from the component of communication, and this is where you had Darwin Smith, who really did. He was such an effective communicator, but he understood that communication is not just about being a megaphone. It's about being a telephone, right? A megaphone communicates in one direction. A telephone communicates in two directions. And that's where it's important as leaders. A lot of times it's like, and I can tell you this from my own experience, I felt like a leader was someone who, like, stood up on a box and, like, okay, for those of you who are hearing me, you're so lucky, right? Like, and I'm broadcasting and pontificating my things. But really, what makes me a far better leader, much more effective leader, is when I recognize the two-way nature of communication. And it's not just the fact that it's two-way. It's also recognizing that it has to be done often. It's not just about, well, I told them once, so they should know. I want to bring up another point. For those of you who may be familiar with Walmart, Walmart is a gigantic company here in the U.S., and I know they're overseas. I don't know which. Hello. Let's see. Hello from Ghana. Very good. Good to meet you. And a proud educator. Excellent. Good to have you here. Tony is saying, staff comment on my delivery as my approach is direct because that's my communication style. When I say it differently, the point is missed and the interpretation is different from my meaning. So it's probably, Tony, what you may be... Oh, hey, Tony. Yeah, it's good to see you. So what I would say is it's probably more of an issue of operating in a low trust environment. Because, again, think about this. If you're operating in a high trust environment, if you misspeak or you say something a little bit differently, then they're going to say, oh, well, they're just, they're not being nice today. Okay. But when you're operating within a high trust environment, again, people are going to afford you grace. So I'm wondering if what you're operating in and what you've created, and I'm not trying to be mean here because I was that guy for a long time. So I don't know, I know the nature of your business because we've communicated, but what I'm saying is there may be some trust, that there might be a trust gap there. Okay. And again, I've created massive trust gaps that are probably pale in comparison to any trust gaps that you may have created. So I know what that's like. And because I created this gap trust, that people wouldn't, they would hold things against me because I would say something and they go, oh, you said that word. And what I might have meant was another word. Now I'm a professional speaker. I'm pretty good with my words, but even still, I mess up from time to time. Okay. But that's what I'm saying. It's the difference between operating between a low trust environment and a high trust environment. A great example the other day, my staff had a conflict and they had a conflict with one another. And it was really because some of us were being silly and some of us were not being, were being more serious. And because it was through messaging, it got skewed and one person got their feelings hurt and rightfully so. Like I could see why they would be upset. But because we operate in a high trust environment, we got through it really quickly. And that's why that's important. So it's not about avoiding conflict. It's about conflict that doesn't need to be conflictual. Does that make sense? So it's not about avoiding conflict is not the goal here. It's about having conflict, but also recognizing that conflict is essential for growth. Okay? So this is something that I see all the time, especially when I see a lot of leaders. Really good point there, Tony. Thank you for bringing that up. Um, yes. So how can I raise the trust? Well, how can you raise the trust? Honestly, start demonstrating. Now, there's lots of ways to do this. So there's 7 elements of trust. I'm not going to get into. I can't unpack all of them right now just because of the constraint of time. That's outside the scope of this here. But there's 7 main elements of trust. Okay, those 2 main elements of trust that I talked about of character and competence. Those 2 things you probably know your competence, like you know your job really, really well, and probably your other people do as well. But also what I'm saying is you're probably operating in an environment where the core values of your company may not be defined. So let me explain this. And this is again a little bit outside the scope, so if you guys want to hang in there just for a few minutes. When you have a company culture that's operating outside of defined company core values, and I mean defined company core values, meaning that they're written down, like they're on something that is written down and they're reviewed often. We have a meeting every day in my organization. And because we have a meeting every day in that organization, we have 5 defined core values. The first thing that we do in the meeting is we go through our wins and victories. It's very quick. It raises the status. It raises the state of everyone's mood. Hey, tell me a win. If you guys want to do this right now, type in a win that you've had recently. It could be a personal win, but make it quick, right? In 10 words or less, name a win that you have had. And I go around the room. Oh, my son won his volleyball, or my daughter won his volleyball game. My son won his football game. I got an A in my class for my master's degree. Okay, great, right? This could literally take 2 minutes within a small staff. Now that everybody's mood is elevated, now we pick up a core value. Okay, so one of the core values of Strategic Boardroom is creating legends, and creating legends in the minds of others. So, Tony, tell me what creating legends means to you. Well, it means this, it means this, it means this. Great, excellent. We define it as, and then I read it straight away from what's actually written. Now, every day, every single day, they have gotten a little inoculation in terms of what is valuable to us in the organization. And a core value is what helps define company culture. And company culture and company brand are inextricably linked. So when you have a company culture that's well defined, the company culture is what's experienced by your staff. The company brand is what's experienced by your clients. That's why this is so important. So if you're ever looking to sell your organization or have somebody else, when you're interviewing other people, you're interviewing them around this established set of core values that becomes the true north for your people to operate within when you're not around. And here's the thing. If you don't define your company culture, if you don't define your core values, they will be defined by the strongest personality in the room. And if that's not always you, that's a problem. So, I know we took a left turn. We're going to turn a right to get back on course here for a little bit. So it's not easy. I'm not giving you I'm not saying like it's a direct line to raising trust, because there's a lot lot of components to it, but if you don't have defined set of core values, anything that I give you is just going to be very anecdotal and very tactical in nature. I'm a strategist. I want to fix the root problems. I want to fix it from top down. So if you don't have defined set of core values, that would be my place to start. Okay. Tony is saying this is very helpful. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad I can help. And it is also in the book that you ordered. So just want to let you know that is there. Goke says makes sense. Darius saying definitely taking notes. Excellent. Let's see here. Karen says interesting. That's a brilliant idea on how to review core values frequently. Yes, and I'll be honest with you that the fact that they're 5 in number, it just matches up really well with the 5-day work week. Right. So, and again, but if you have a 7-day work week, who cares? Review it again. Right. So when we're talking about here in communication, as I steer us back onto course as a navigator, okay, right here we are back on course. We need to review them more. Right. I'm telling you, it needs to be a daily thing. It needs to be an absolute daily thing. They need to be hired on core values. They need to be evaluated on core values during their quarterly or semi-annual or annual evaluations. They need to be given promotions based on core values. And to me, it's everything. And even terminations are easier when core values are brought into play, because it's just a non-alignment. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. They're just an alignment of core values. Okay. So core values are those things that are so core to you that you're willing to take action on them. Okay. Like for you, a value is clearly education. Okay, because the way you and I connected, but it's also, is it enough of a value for you to take action on if someone doesn't follow through with that? Like these would be fireable offenses. Okay, so think about that. What those could be, right? So I'll have to leave that there. Is there any book that you can recommend for us? Well, this book over my shoulder. I'm not here to promote my book, but that is The Time Wealthy Advantage. And we talk about this very thing, okay? I'm actually writing a book called Leader Boss, which is actually about the strategic leadership. I don't have that written yet, but everything I'm talking to you about this is following what's called the Viper framework, which is in The Time Wealthy Advantage. So I'm not here to promote the book, but since you asked the question, Diana, I'm going to give you a quick 2 seconds on this. Go to strategicboardroom.com. If you're in the US, go to strategicboardroom.com. Right in the main page, there's a button that says order the book or buy the book or something. I don't know what it says, but go there. You can buy the book. There's some bonuses there you can get as well. I will sign it and I will send it to you. If you're outside the United States, go to Amazon and you can buy the books there. That is the best way for you to get it, way faster than Amazon is obviously way bigger and way they have the infrastructure to get it to you internationally than I do. So I won't be able to sign it obviously because it goes directly from Amazon, but that would be the best way to either get it on Amazon. If you're in the US, you can get it on my website. All right. So sorry for that. Okay. Idrisu says this makes sense a lot. Okay, great. Glad this is helping. That takes the personal feeling out of it, using those core values as the rubric. That's exactly right, Tony. I couldn't have said it any better. It makes it much more clinical, right? You say, hey, look, we're going to have a difficult conversation and it's not against you. It's just, we have to talk about the behavior, and that behavior is not in alignment with these core values, right? So it can be much more clinical, right? And not like, well, you're this and that, and then it becomes this thing and that thing, right? But understand this. If your core values are defined, be prepared to have them used against you. So you have to live these core values. You can't be very situational in your core values. Okay. Diana's saying, got it. Thanks. Excellent. Let's see here. How do we implement a collective financial account early? Hold on, Desha. You have a question here. I want to make sure I understand it. How do we implement a collective financial account early enough to build trust and transparency without letting money overshadow our grassroots mission? A collective financial account early. So I'm trying to understand. Can you give me maybe a little bit more context of you can't hear? Can anybody else hear? I'm hearing me in my headphones, so it might be you. But I'll go ahead and answer the question the best I can. Again, to me, this goes back to company culture. So to answer that question, I think it's so important to recognize that okay, you can hear now. Okay, perfect. So, um, I think you have to recognize when you're creating either a high trust environment or if you're creating a low trust environment as the leader. So for me, this all begins and ends with trust, but it also begins and ends with that shared vision. Because if you're what you're talking about here is, trying to create this collective financial where everybody is rowing in the same direction, that's where trust, vision, and communication come into play. And all of these, if these are all three of these areas are operating in a low trust environment, you're still going to be an effective leader. But I'm telling you, you're probably going to have to help change the company culture. So I think I mean, money is important. It absolutely is important. And it's important that people understand that shared vision. So think about the uphill battle that, Darwin Smith had in Kimberly Clark, because Kimberly Clark at that point in time, everyone was fine to stick with the mills. Like, think about it. You might have had people within 5 years of retirement, and all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, dude, you're gonna sell the mills? What am I supposed to do, dude? I don't know what to tell you, but your previous leadership should have probably invested in more R&D so we could pivot." And they might have been able to save the mills, but there's no way they could have with what they were saying, because they were in a dying and declining industry. Okay, so this is going to take, like, these are the sorts of things that you sign up for as a leader. So, so let me go ahead. I see you got a couple of other questions on here. Let me go ahead and finish this up, and I'm gonna answer questions at the end. So here's the thing, though. What I see with communication, especially with leaders in organizations, is they often will come in and they start telling people what all these priorities need to be. And if you are an entrepreneur, and I get it, and it's like, well, why can't anybody work like I do, right? And it's like you've got that list of 37 things that you're going to get done today. Well, that's a problem, right? And I know, and again, if I had three hands, I'd put them all up, because I know what that's like as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, having all these different ideas. Well, here's the problem. Every time you walk into the room with a different priority, it creates stress with your staff. So the problem is that having too many priorities has the same impact as having no priorities. This is why you have to recognize that you cannot tell someone that something is a priority unless you're willing to attach a resource to it. What do I mean? What am I talking about a resource? I'm talking about time, I'm talking about money, I'm talking about people, or a combination of all three. If you're not willing to attach one or more of these things to this priority that you're telling me is a priority, then it's not a priority. So, or if you've got other priorities and you're going to try to steal the time, money, or people away from that priority, and then say, cool, then that's not a priority any longer. Am I understanding that? So that is really, really important. And all of those things are the crux of strategic leadership. So, you said, say that again. I am not... Tony, can you be more specific in your question? Because I was kind of streaming there for a little bit. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat. One thing I am going to do, I'm going to offer, if you guys are interested, you are welcome to join me in my school community. And I have way too many tabs up on my screen here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you can go to school.com/strategic boardroom. And that is, like I said, I'll put that in the comments section. There's no charge for joining right now. That will change, and it's probably going to change probably within the next couple of weeks. So just letting you know. So you're saying, okay, you're good, Tony. All right, so Idrisu is saying, okay, so this, let me hold my book up. If you type in my name, it's actually not hard to find, but go to The Time Wealthy Advantage. You guys can see that. Okay, that's the name of the book, The Time Wealthy Advantage. Or you can just type in, or you can just go to Amazon and type in my name, Mark Dolfini. So, so there is that. So that is everything that I have. Does anybody have any other questions? If not, we will land the plane. Give everybody just a few seconds. I'm going to take a sip of my water here. this has been the first time I've actually offered the strategic leadership session, and this has been a lot of fun. So I really appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with me. Don't see any questions coming in, so I am going to go ahead and wish you all well. If you guys are, again, if you're interested, one of the things that you can do if you're wanting to see the replay right away, Daisha, it is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for sticking around. You had some really good questions too. Thank you. And Darius just joined. We'll definitely looking at adding the book into the collection. Excellent. And so yes, again, just for those of you who are in the U.S. and you want me to send you a signed copy, go to strategicboardroom.com and you can order it there. So I will. I don't know that I have a. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, if you look at the bottom ticker, you can see it there. All right. Let's see. Tony is saying this is wonderful. Thank you. You are most welcome, Tony, and I'm glad to hear back from you, so I can get that book out to you. And let's see. So I would want to ask: is there any specific approach to a worker with a bad character? Idrisu, it probably is. If they are not in alignment with your core values, they are probably a better employee somewhere else. So because if you're saying that they have a bad, they have a personality flaw, right? Let's say that let's say that you're about honesty and that they constantly lie about things. That's a hard thing to change with that individual. And that's why whenever I interview someone as a worker or even as a client, trust and know there's an interview process, because I don't want to end up working for a client that does not align with my core values. They don't have to be perfect, but there has to be some synergy there, right? Like, I'll just be honest with you. Like I'm a Christian, right? But I have respect for other religions. I do. If someone comes to me and is like anti-religion, that's going to be really hard for me to be authentic with them and still coach them and still work with them as a strategist. Not because I can't set that aside, but because part of what I don't want to have to temper what I say because I don't want to be offensive to them. So I just you know what? We're not in line with the core values. That's okay. Right? They would probably be a better fit for someone else. There are so many clients out there for you to solve problems for. But if let's say this person lies all the time, that's a character problem, right? That's why the first interview that I do is a character-based interview. This second interview, especially if I'm hiring someone to work for Strategic Boardroom, it's going to be around their skills, because I really truly believe that I can teach most skills, right? If it's something that they're interested in, most people can learn skills. I cannot teach character. It's hard. And trust and know, like, we're raising 3 kids, and, you know, beyond a certain point, you know, like, they have choices that they're going to be making. So this is why I'm saying it's just very difficult. So that would be my suggestion. So realistically, if it's not in alignment with the core values of your company, it's just best to let them go. Just let them know that it's not a good fit. And I will tell you this, man, it is sometimes you have to recognize that the team of tomorrow will not be your team, or your team of today will not be your team of tomorrow. And either they need to change, or unfortunately their names need to change. Okay. All right. You bet. It has been my pleasure. All right, everybody, we are going to land the plane. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I will see you guys in the boardroom. Take good care.